Hello, hello, hello. Oh, whoops. Hello, hello, hello. Namaste, my witchlings. Welcome to the Yoga Witches Cauldron, our weekly check-in podcast, chill-out session, where I take, our theme of the week, our Sanskrit word of the week, and weave it all into a yoga witchy kind of thing. So, whether y'all are returning or joining us here for the very first time, I am so very grateful to see y'all. Hey, hi, hello. I am Di, your yoga witch and guide here, and this is the Yoga Witch's Cauldron. So, without further ado, let's get going, shall we? Did I seriously I did. Stuck my finger right in the middle of my glasses. I'm doing stellar. Alright, let's take a moment to arrive. Not necessarily in a metaphorical way, not in a set and intention, intention and rush on kind of way. We are actually arriving. If you're sitting, feel where your body meets the chair or the floor. If you're laying down listening to us here, feel the weight of yourself being held. And if you're moving, because let's be honest here, some of us cannot be still without leaving our bodies, go ahead and notice that too. Mind you, there is absolutely nothing to fix right this second, and nothing to improve, nothing to optimize. And that's already our lesson. Because tonight we are talking about love as presence, not as affection or attachment or effort, sacrifice or performance. Presence. We are talking the kind of love that doesn't rush in to correct, manage, or solve shit. The kind of love that sticks around long enough to actually see what's here. Presence. Presence gets talked about in a lot of spiritual spaces. And it's usually as something lofty or abstract, something we're supposed to achieve. But presence isn't an idea. Presence is not an idea. It's a skill, a practice, an embodied capacity that can be strengthened or neglected over time. And so forking many of us were never taught how to stay present without immediately trying to do something. As kids, a lot of us were taught to be helpful. We were all taught to be productive. Because if you're not being productive, you're not doing anything, right? We were taught implicitly or explicitly to make discomfort go away, ours or others, as quickly as humanly possible. So tonight, we're slowing that particular reflex down. We're not going to judge it. We're not here to shame it. We are simply here to see it clearly. Because in yoga, on and off the mat, what we can see clearly is what we can choose to work with. And let's start there. Let's start where yoga usually begins. The body, right? Not the idea of the body, not the aesthetic of the body. The actual living, breathing, sensation-filled body that you are in right this second. On the mat, fixing often wears very polite clothes. It doesn't announce itself as force or violence. It shows up Something was tickling my ankle. I had to check and see what it was. It's a sergeant. All right. Sorry, y'all. Furry four-legged distraction. All right. We're going to back up here. On the mat. When we're in class or in doing our own flow at home, fixing typically shows up wearing very, very polite clothes. It almost never announces itself as force or violence. It simply shows up as helpfulness, as doing it right, or as being a good student. Fixing shows up when you overcorrect your posture before sensation has had a chance to speak. When you force a shape because it looks right, or because someone once told you it was right. When you judge a sensation as wrong or bad or something that needs to be pushed through in order to get somewhere better. You feel tightness and immediately brace against it. You feel wobble and immediately tense. You feel some discomfort and you immediately assume that you have failed. And none of that makes you bad at yoga. It simply makes you well-trained and well-conditioned. Most of us, again, were taught explicitly or even implicitly that discomfort means danger, and danger means fix it now. Sorry, doggo is being a brat. All right, so the body sends a signal, and the mind jumps in like an anxious manager with a clipboard. Adjust this, correct that, override this. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Yoga teaches us slowly, if we allow it. Sensation is information. It's not a problem. Heat is information. Shaking, information. Stretch, pressure, compression, even some discomfort, it's all information. When we rush in to fix these things, we cut off that conversation. Imagine doing that in a relationship. Someone starts to speak, and before they finish the first sentence, at times the first word, you interrupt them with a solution. Even if the solution is right, something incredibly important is lost. And that would be the communication. Now, how often do we do that to ourselves on the mat? How often do we adjust ourselves out of listening to ourselves? Think about how quickly you move away from sensation. How fast you reach for a cue or a correction, a shape you already know before you allow your body to finish its sentence. And breath is typically the first place this shows up too, because breath gets treated like a tool. Inhale to calm down, exhale to release, use your breath. None of these are wrong per se, but they're incomplete, because breath, as much as we wish it could be, it is not a lever that you pull to get a result. Breath is a relationship. And trust me, relationships do not respond well to force. Ask any teenager, right? I mean, hell. If you have ever been told to calm down while you were upset, you already understand this one. So let's try something. Let's try this not necessarily as an exercise, not as something you need to succeed, but simply as an experiment. Notice your breath right now. Don't change it. Don't deepen it. Don't regulate it. Don't try to improve it. Just simply notice your breath right now. Notice where it moves. Where does it arrive easily? Where does it hesitate? Does it feel guarded, shallow, or restrained anywhere? And now, if your first impulse is to correct it, to smooth it out, lengthen it, or make it prettier, honey, that's not a failure. That's a habit. That's conditioning. Now, yoga is not in the practice of eliminating our habits. It's the practice of seeing them without immediately jumping to obey them. That pause right there, that pause is presence. Mindfulness. Presence on the mat generally means staying with sensation long enough for it to reveal its texture. Not just tight or not tight, but heat. God only knows how many times I've noticed my thighs burning during a class. Tremble. You hold plank or chaturanga long enough and your arms start to just kind of shake a little bit. That buzz you get when you've held a posture. Resistance. Ease. Sharp edges. Or even soft gradients. We've all felt at least some of those during a flow, right? When you stay with these sensations, sensation often changes. And it's not because it was forced to, but because sensation is not static. And here's a quiet truth a lot of people don't necessarily talk about. Most of the time, sensation changes on its own when we stop forcing it. It's not always, and it's not magically. Not because yoga is a cure-all, but often enough to teach us something important about how our bodies work. Forcing teaches control. Presence teaches trust. You stay present with your body, you actually learn what it's capable of, and you learn to trust that your body knows what it needs to do. And this trust is a form of love. Definitely not the sentimental kind or the performative kind. This is the grounded kind. The kind that says, I'm here with you. I don't need you to be different for me to stay. And that, oh my God, is so radical for a lot of us. Because so many of us learned really early, really young, that staying was conditional. You can stay here with us if you behave. You can stay if you act right, you perform, or you can stay in the class if you improved, or if you just didn't take up too much space. How many of us learned all of those lessons? So when we bring yoga onto the mat, that same conditioning often sneaks in with us. We try to earn the pose, or earn the breath, or even worse, earn the right to rest. Earn the right to rest. Something wrong with that sentence. Presence dismantles that particular economy. Presence says, you can be exactly as you are. I'm still here. Doesn't mean we never adjust. No. And it doesn't mean that alignment doesn't matter. Oh, God's no. It doesn't mean that we ignore the pain signals or refuse support when it's needed. It means adjustment comes after listening, not instead of it. It means the body gets to speak before the mind decides what it means. And that right there is the heart of this practice. Not flexibility or strength or aesthetic shapes to take pictures of and post on Instagram. It's relationship. A relationship with sensation, with breath, with yourself that doesn't vanish the moment something gets uncomfortable. So, as you move through your practice this week, this month, this lifetime, notice when that urge to fix appears. Notice it without judgment, and instead of immediately obeying it, try staying just one breath longer. Just one. Let the sensation speak. Let breath respond in its own time. And let presence do what force never can. Because love on the mat doesn't always move. Sometimes it stays. And that staying, that oh so quiet, embodied staying, is honestly where yoga actually begins, my friends. Now, fixing and this urge to fix didn't come up out of absolutely nowhere. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to become hyper-vigilant, over-responsible, or even allergic to discomfort just for fun. You know, this urge to fix is very much learned. And for most of us, well, it was learned very early and it worked. If, like me, you grew up needing to manage other people's emotions, fixing kept you safe. If you learned that tension in the room meant danger, fixing helped you stabilize shit. And if you were praised for being helpful or mature or easy, fixing kept you valued. And if discomfort, yours or anybody else's, wasn't allowed, fixing kept everything and everybody moving. So, let's be abundantly clear about something, because this absolutely matters here. The urge to fix is not a moral failure. It is not a personality flaw. It is not proof that you are controlling, broken, or incapable of presence. Fixing is an adaptation. It's an intelligent response to a nervous system that learned very early, if I don't intervene, something bad is probably going to happen. The problem isn't that you learned it. The problem is when that adaptation never gets updated. Because what once kept you safe can now quietly keep you disconnected. On the mat, fixing disconnects you from sensation. You override the body before it finishes speaking. Off the mat, fixing disconnects you from people. Because when someone shares something hard and we rush in to fix it, we leave the moment. We might still be physically present. We might even still be making eye contact and saying all the right things. But internally, oh honey, we have gone somewhere else. We have left our bodies, we have left the relationship, and we have left presence behind. Now, generally, we do this with genuinely good intentions. It is from the goodness of our heart. We want to help, we want to relieve pain, we want to make things better. But, y'all knew there was a but coming, right? But impact matters so much more than intent. When someone is met with solutions before they're met with understanding, the message received is often, whether intentional or not, this is too much. We need to make it stop. And the number of us that learned that message long before we ever spoke it to anyone else is huge. I'm going to sneeze. Give me a second. Maybe not. All right. So, presence asks something different of us. Presence asks us to tolerate not knowing what to do right away. That is uncomfortable as hell. Presence asks that we feel the urge to act. Presence asks us to feel the urge to act and not immediately obey it, not jump to action. That is unsettling. Oh, is it unsettling? Presence asks us to stay in the body when the mind is desperately looking for an escape hatch. That, my loves, is vulnerable. And let's name this quite clearly, because it really does get misunderstood so often. This is not passive. That resisting the urge to jump in and fix everything is not passive. It is highly disciplined. It takes far more regulation to stay present than it does to react and fix. In yogic philosophy, restraint isn't about denial or suppression. It is about choice. Choice comes from awareness. Awareness comes from presence. Without presence, your reactions run the show. If you don't, you do not choose to fix. You reflexively fix. It's not a conscious choice. It's just immediate action. You don't decide to jump in. You're already jumping mid-sentence. You do not even notice you've left your body until you're exhausted and wondering why connection is feeling kind of thin here. Presence creates a pause. Not necessarily a dramatic pause. Definitely not a perfect pause. A human pause. Just enough space to notice, I'm tense. I'm holding my breath. I'm trying to manage this. And in that noticing, something else becomes possible. You might still choose to act. You might still offer help. You might still set a boundary or share some insight. But now, it's a choice, not a compulsion. This is where yoga off the mat becomes real. Because the same patterns that show up in your poses, in your asana, show up in your relationships. That same urge to override sensation shows up as an urge to override emotion. The same impatience with discomfort shows up as impatience with complexity. That same need to get it right shows up as a fear of sitting with uncertainty. Presence doesn't necessarily erase those patterns. What it does is it makes them visible. And what becomes visible can now be worked with gently, honestly, and over time. So, if you notice yourself fixing this week on the mat, in conversation, in your own inner dialogue, don't rush to correct that either. Just notice it. Feel where it lives in your body. Notice what it's trying to protect. Because fixing is not the enemy here. Unconscious fixing is. See the difference? We're not necessarily changing our behaviors. We're right now just noticing what those behaviors and actions are. So, presence, quiet, steady, embodied presence, is how we begin to loosen the grip of this unconscious desire to fix. And we're doing that without shaming the part of us that learned it in the first place. That's not good yoga. That's compassion with a spine. Now, if you are enjoying our podcast and would like to step just a smidge bit deeper into our coven here, consider clicking on that join button down below and becoming a member of our channel. There are some amazing perks for all of my witchlings, with levels starting at just $1 a month. How affordable is that, witchlings? And quick reminder that you can also help this channel out for free by doing the like, share, subscribe thing. Ring the bell so you know when we're posting. And then share this channel or this video with a friend. Sharing is caring, right? I appreciate all of your support, you guys. I absolutely love you. You are the best witchlings ever. Thank you so very much for tuning in here. All right. Back to the show. Take a sip. Itchy. All right. We've talked about presence on the mat. Let's take this shit off the mat and into daily life. Because this, my darling witchlings, is where the practice actually gets tested. Right? Right. Think about the last conversation you had where someone told you something difficult. Not a casual complaint, not small talk, something real. As you remember it, don't replay the story. Notice your body. What happened first? Did your jaw tighten? Did your shoulders lift? Did your breath get shallow or even stall entirely? Did your mind start assembling solutions before the person finished speaking? That moment, that exact moment right there is the practice. Not the words, not the story, not the outcome, the somatic exit. When you just check the fluff out of your body. So many of us think we're listening when we're actually preparing our response. We're scanning for the right thing to say, the helpful insight, the solution that proves we care. But listening isn't silent problem solving. Listening is staying available. And availability does not mean self-erasure. Presence is not absorbing other people's emotions until you're flooded. It's not fixing them to relieve your own discomfort, and it's sure as hell not staying past your capacity and calling it love. Presence here is clarity with boundaries intact, and I wanna ground this in something very, very real. Last night, 4:00 this morning, my son messages me, and he called twice. That alone told me something was seriously wrong. This child does not call me at 4 a.m. So, of course, I replied to him, I'm awake, but not for long. And it turns out he and his girlfriend had just had a really hard but really necessary conversation. It didn't go the way he had hoped, didn't go the way he expected, and his nervous system did what nervous systems do when something cracks open unexpectedly, especially for those of us who are on the spectrum or are trauma survivors. It panicked. And his very first instinct was, I need mom. Call mom. So I stayed. I talked him through it. I helped him slow his thoughts down, name what he was actually feeling, and remember that one hard conversation does not mean the world is ending. And there was a moment, a very, very real, very human moment, where a part of me thought, well, what's a little bit more sleep deprivation when your kid needs you, right? Right. That thought right there is familiar to so many of us, especially if you're a parent. And here's where presence matters. Because I did stay, but I didn't disappear. And at a certain point, I told him the truth, that I was extremely tired, that I was highly medicated, and that I was getting close to shutting down and passing the fluff out. And that's about when he noticed what time it was. He thanked me for staying up. He thanked me for being there. He thanked me for letting him get this off his chest and work through it. And then we both let the conversation end. That is presence. Not martyrdom or self-erasure, and definitely not fixing at all costs. That is presence with honesty. I didn't stay because I was supposed to. I stayed because at that point I could, and I named when I was reaching my limit. That's what it looks like off the mat. You can be present and still say, dude, I do not have the bandwidth for this right now. You could be present and still say, I hear you, but I'm not the person to fix this for you. I am not the one to solve this. This is not within my wheelhouse. You can be present and still choose to rest. That is not abandonment. That is honesty. And honesty, clean, grounded honesty, is just another form of love. Many of us were taught that love means availability without limits. Stay longer, give more, push through it, handle it. But that version of love, more often than not, ends in burnout, resentment, or just quiet disappearance. Presence offers something steadier. Presence says, I can stay here without leaving myself. Notice how often we leave our bodies in conversation. We smile, we nod, we say the right things, but internally, we're already gone. We are planning our reply, we're managing outcomes, bracing for impact. We play yes dear, where you smile and nod and hope he'll go away, right? Presence brings you back into your breath, not to regulate it, but just to feel it. Back into your posture, not to perform it, just to inhabit it. Back into the simple, felt sense of being here. And when you're here, something shifts. You don't need to fix to prove you care. Your attention does the caring. When someone feels truly heard, they usually don't want immediate solutions. They just want steadiness. They want permission to have their experience without being rushed through it. That kind of presence is rare, but it's also learnable. And it starts with noticing when you check out and leave. So this week, I want you guys to pay attention to those exits. Your jaw tightening, your breath hitching, that internal scramble to make it better. That is not a cue to shame yourself. That is your cue to return to your body, your breath, and the moment. Stay long enough to respond from presence instead of panic. Because presence doesn't mean you never act. It means that when you do act, it comes from clarity instead of fear. And people feel that difference even if they never ever name it. Presence communicates respect. What it says is, I trust you enough to have your own experience. I'm here with you. And I'm still here with myself. That is love, my friends, off the mat. It's not loud or dramatic. It's just steady enough to stay and wise enough to rest when it's time. Thank you, Roro. I checked in with chat for just a quick second. Hello, Colin. Okay. Coolio. All right, you guys. Back to work here. Let's talk about attunement. Attunement often makes me think of Reiki. But anyway, let's talk about attunement, because this is where presence matures into discernment. Attunement is not the same thing as empathy, and it is definitely not projection. Those three frequently get tangled together, especially in spiritual spaces. Empathy says, I feel with you. It's resonance. It's the ability to sense another person's emotional state. Projection says, I feel for you, based on my own story. It looks like care, but actually, it's memory wearing a costume. It's when your history steps in and starts narrating somebody else's experience, right? Attunement says something completely different. Attunement says, I am aware of myself and you at the same time. That's an advanced practice, because most of us were trained to do one or the other. Either we disappear into other people, losing track of ourselves entirely, or we stay locked tight inside of our own experience and call that independence. Attunement sits in the middle. It requires stillness, not physical stillness, but internal steadiness. Your body can be moving, and the conversation can be highly emotional. The moment can be charged, but inside something is grounded. When your nervous system isn't thrashing around for control, perception sharpens. You start to notice tone instead of just words. You notice pacing, what's being rushed and what's being dodged. You notice when someone needs space instead of advice, and silence instead of reassurance. This is yogic awareness in real time. It's the same awareness that tells you when to stay in a pose and when to come out. That same awareness that senses when effort has tipped to strain. Presence is respectful because it doesn't assume. It doesn't rush to label, and it doesn't flatten complexity into something tidy and manageable. It allows people to be what they are without immediately trying to change them. That can feel pretty damned uncomfortable. Because many of us equate love with intervention. If I care, I should do something. If I see pain, I should fix it. If I understand, I need to act. But attunement introduces a pause. Not a frozen pause. A listening pause. A pause that asks, what is actually needed here? Sometimes the answer here is action. Sometimes. Sometimes it's a boundary. Other times it's silence. Attunement doesn't remove responsibility, it simply refines it. Action that comes from anxiety, usually loud, rushed, and imprecise. Action that comes from clarity, however, is quieter and far more effective. And that's true in yoga. Yoga is full of movement, but the movement is guided by awareness. You don't fling yourself into an asana and just hope for the best, right? You listen, you adjust, you respond. Life works the same way. Attunement allows you to stay responsive instead of reactive. Responsive means you're in relationship with the moment. Reactive means you're following and obeying old patterns. And here's what we tend to miss. Attunement protects everyone involved. It protects you from overgiving, over-identifying, or taking on what is not yours. It protects others from being managed, interpreted, or rushed through their own processes. That is respect. Not polite respect, embodied respect. The kind of respect that says, I see you as a whole person, not a problem that needs solving. And this is why attunement is a yogic skill, not just an emotional one. It requires practice and nervous system regulation, and it requires the willingness to stay present when certainty would feel so much more comfortable. And like any yogic skill, or any worthwhile skill, it develops over time. You will not get it right every single time. We're human. You're going to miss cues. You're going to act too quickly sometimes. Honey, that's not failure. That's practice. Practice makes perfect, right? The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. Because awareness is what allows love to move intelligently, not impulsively or defensively, intelligently. Attunement is love with discernment. Love that listens before it leaps. Love that stays grounded in the body and knows when to act and when not to. And that, in a world addicted to urgency and certainty, is quietly revolutionary, my friends. Check in with chat. Oh. Yep. Yeah, Joram is entertaining. Yes. All right. All right. I know. All right. Hey, Colin. Good to have you. Okay, let's wrap this up. Let's bring this home with a little teeny tiny little practice for this week. It's not a transformation. It's not a vow. It's not a promise to suddenly be better at everything. Dear gods, no, I would never do that to you guys. We're just noticing. This week, just notice when you tense up in conversation. That first tightening in your body, your jaw clenching, your shoulders creeping up towards your ears. That reflex to jump in, smooth it over, make it better, and say just the right thing. When you notice it, pause. Take a breath. Soften your jaw. Remove your shoulders from your earlobes. Feel your feet on the floor or your seat where you're being held, and just stay. You don't need the perfect response. You don't need the right words, and you don't need to fix, rescue, or resolve. You simply need presence. Because love doesn't always move. Sometimes it stays. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is to remain exactly where you are. Awake, grounded, and not reaching for the exit. That is yoga. Not a pose or an asana, not a philosophy, and not something you are performing for approval. A way of being with what is, without abandoning yourself, and without trying to remake others into something easier for you to hold. as we begin to close our show here, notice your breath again. Not to change it or deepen it, just to notice it is there. Notice the space around you, the room, the quiet, the fact that you made time to be here. You're allowed to practice this slowly. You are certainly allowed to stumble. Again, we are human. You are allowed to learn presence in bits and pieces. That's how it actually works. And before we go our separate ways, I need to remind you of something, because this part always, always matters. Spread love. Spread joy. Spread kindness. Not the performative kind or the passive kind. I want the kind that shows up and stays. The kind that knows when to act and when to simply be with what is. There is enough darkness and hate in this world already. Let's try to be beacons of light and hope for those who are still stumbling in the dark. Tell your loved ones in all their forms, 2 legs, 4 legs, fur, paws, claws, wings, scales, that you love them beyond all measure. Time passes far more quickly than any of us want to acknowledge, and those opportunities to say I love you one more time are not promised. If you take only one thing from everything I do here every day, from every practice, every story, every moment we share here, please remember this. You are loved. You are wanted. You are needed. And there is a reason you are here, even if you don't know what it is yet. I didn't find mine until I was 45. So, my witchlings, thank you for stepping into the cauldron tonight. Thank you for practicing presence in a world that rushes. Thank you for staying. May your awareness be steady. May your boundaries be gentle. May your love know when to move and when to stay. I love you guys to bits. You are the best part of this whole entire thing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. Namaste, my witchlings, and blessed be.